Okay. So I'm reading 2 Samuel chapter 12. And this is where David sees Bathsheba bathing, finds her very attractive, and sleeps with her. And then she goes home, finds out she's pregnant, and then David tries to cover everything up by having Uriah sleep with his wife, so then Uriah will think that the kid is his. And when Uriah continues to be a righteous man, and David can't find a way out of his mess, he has Uriah killed and then marries Bathsheba. This really brings up a lot for me in my own life. One of my friends calls it BC, so before Christ. In my BC life, I was absolutely devastated because the man that I loved more than anything had broken up with me, and I was trying to move on. And this man that I met while in the military, he felt so deeply in love with me, and he was such a good man. He was so very wonderful, so very kind, so smart, and he was so gentle and wonderful. And I thought, Maggie, just be with him and everything will be okay. You don't really need to have all those romantic feelings for him. Just ignore those and go with what's best for you. And I did try. I tried really hard to do what was right. I was only 18, turned 19, and we weren't ever able to live in the same even country because we were in different countries serving in the military. And it doesn't take long before warning signs start coming. And I ignored all the warning signs, thinking that somehow I would be bigger, stronger, and you know how sometimes you deny what you don't want to see, and you don't want to be honest, you don't want to be real and open with yourself, because then you're going to have to make big decisions, and you just don't want to do that, and you'd have to admit that you made a mistake. So I tried very hard to just ignore and deny and just keep moving, but it didn't take long before I got myself in a situation where I ended up hurting that man very, very deeply. And I will go to my grave knowing what I did destroyed another human being, and the word sorry and repentance, and I can do everything in my life to try to make up for it. And I'll never be able to take that back, ever. I'll never be able to cover the hurt and the wounds and all those things because I hurt him deeply. It took a little bit before I could see the ramifications of my actions, and I had public embarrassment and stuff, with people that when they found out what I did. But it was more dealing with the fact that I hurt someone on purpose for something so selfish and things like that. And what ends up happening is I'm like, okay, well, now I have to live my life learning from my mistakes. And so I move on with my life, and I just start living as a 21-year-old female, single, and having fun. And I start dating another man who was a good guy, smart, treated me well, the same kind of thing. And I thought, those romantic feelings don't matter. So I started denying how I felt. I started denying things about myself and being real and open and honest, because that would end up hurting someone. And I ended up kind of doing the same thing. And it was then that I realized that those warning signs are there to keep you from going down a path that you're going to regret. So in my life, I have hurt 2 people very badly, and they say, once a cheater, always a cheater. And I say that's not true, because if a person truly wants to see what if a person truly wants to change and make a different life, make a different path for themselves, they can do so. But it's a lot of work, and you have to stop doing what you've done in the past. You do what you've always done, and you'll get what you've always gotten. And so when I started looking at, like reflecting, I saw the same pattern over and over and over again. And there were warning signs that things weren't going well. And had I been honest and open with myself, I could have stopped this from happening both times. And David, I see in this situation, had many warning signs that could have stopped him from going down a path that he could never come back from. And so, it's different when you screw up and there's nobody that's really impacted. But when you end up forever changing someone else's life because of your selfishness or because of your deeds, it's so hard to come back from that. And I will forever live with my actions had permanent consequences for someone else. And I have tried so very, very hard for the last 26 years now to never do that again. So what I've had to do is recognize warning signs right at the beginning. So here are my warning signs. If something's going on in your brain, thoughts, you need to look at them and you need to evaluate them. If you notice that you're finding someone attractive and you're already in a relationship, you need to evaluate that and say, okay, is this just you admiring God's beautiful creatures, or is there something more? If that thought comes up again where you're finding that person attractive, then you need to look at your relationship. What's going on with your relationship? Are you spending enough time in your relationship? Are you investing in it? Or are you feeling like you are being left out, left alone, feeling like you're not connected? Because those are usually the first signs, at least for me. When I start dreaming about someone else, dreaming about having a kiss or having a relationship or something like that, the first thing I do when I wake up is I tell my husband, hey, I just had a dream about somebody else. And he knows that that means we're not spending quality time together. We have to have that connection. Otherwise, it's going to go down the same path that it has gone down in the past. And I have vowed never, ever to do that again. And I have children, and I will never have my kids' life destroyed because I wasn't feeling connected to someone, or I found someone kind of hot or whatever, because that is so unfair to them. And what does that tell them? And so I have to think about my ramifications, my consequences. And I mean, I'm older now, so probably not as much of a snag as I used to be for other people, but the concept is still the same. And so I always look for warning signs. First, I have to be honest with myself about how I feel and what's really going on. And even if that means I need to make tough choices, have tough conversations, I need to do it. And I need to evaluate whether this is something that can go forward or whether we need to find a way to work through this or whatever. But I no longer ignore my feelings and deny them. I think that's the biggest thing. And sometimes you're just going through bumps and struggles. And I'm talking to God about it. And I'm like, hey, I don't know what's going on. You need to help me. And since I have vowed that I will take my covenant seriously, until either I'm dead or until something happens. I vowed that I wasn't going to sleep with anyone unless they were my husband. And when you keep that vow in mind and you keep that at the forefront, it just changes how you look at every situation. And so David and Bathsheba, the first thing that he did that I see was a warning sign, was he was by himself resting when everybody that was good for him wasn't around. Well, that's dangerous. That's like going to a nightclub or having a drink or, being around a bunch of people who aren't the best influence for you. And then he sees something that draws his attention, and he finds her very attractive. There's nothing wrong with finding someone attractive, but it's what he does after that. Because if you've ever done this, you know that there's all these steps along the way that you have to continue to pursue in order to have the affair. And he needed to turn around, and he needed to pull himself back. The powerful thing about having accountability partners, one thing that David didn't have was that whole I can't marry anybody else thing. He wasn't promised to just one person. He had many, many wives and concubines and all that stuff. And so this was just him playing with his flesh and feeding something within himself. And then once he then had to tell others, hey, I really find her pretty, bring her over to me. He could have stopped then. Someone could have said, sir, really not a good idea. And then he had to talk with her. All of these steps along the way, they were like roadblocks or warning signs that, hey, this is not a good idea. And then he commits the thing that he shouldn't have committed. And you can come back from that. But he tries to just hide and deny and ignore and find a way around it so he could have his cake and eat it too. And it doesn't work that way. God's going to hold him accountable. And what he ends up doing is destroying Bathsheba and everything she had in her life. And she really didn't have a lot of say, a lot of rights at that time. So she is left at the mercy of David. And she knows that Uriah is a good man, and he was killed because David made a mistake. Now, if you look at Uriah, he does everything right. And he really doesn't need anyone in his life to tell him what to do, because he has already committed himself to staying faithful and loyal. So I'm talking about when it's hard to stay faithful and loyal, because let's be real, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you're just not feeling it like you used to, or feeling it like you usually do. And what I'm saying is, look at your thoughts, look at your feelings, and be honest. Have those tough conversations. I think the most important thing is to just not deny or ignore what's going on. I think if we can do that, we save ourselves so much trouble, so much heartache, and so much frustration. I think people are afraid to have those tough conversations because they're embarrassed that they even have those feelings. But I think those feelings are fairly normal. Over the 24 years I've been with my husband, I've had those feelings many, many, many times. It doesn't mean I have to act on them, but it does mean I have to do something about them. And it's really dangerous. Your mind is so sneaky and tricky, and you can start to live this life where life is better without this person and all these things, and you need to be really, really careful. What I've had to do a couple of times is think about, okay, say that I have this relationship with this other person. Then what? How long would that last before those feelings come back again? And what would my kids then see me as? What would that say to every single person in my life, that Maggie didn't really mean what she said all those years about living a life of purity and faithfulness and things like that. My kids would have their lives destroyed, have to have Christmases at 2 different places and all those things. And then their idea of commitment and of marriage and everything would be completely forever shattered because I decided that my feelings were more important than my covenant, than my commitments and things like that. And I really had to think about what I really wanted in the end. And then I had to find a way to go back and find a way to work through my situation. So I would say be open and honest with yourself. Check your warning signs and just have those tough conversations.